joined and you do have your audio and video on, please turn those off on your computer or tablet or however you're watching us. That way that we can keep any kind of background noise to a minimum, and all of the other participants are only hearing from the speaker. Any questions, please hold them to the end, and then you can put them in the chat window that will be available at the. I think you should be able to see a chat box at the bottom. You click on that chat, and then you can type in your question. So let's keep the questions to the chat. If you have trouble with the chat window at the end, we can open it up to some audio questions as well. So thank you again for attending tonight's program. I will keep the introductions light, as many of you are likely familiar with me. My name is Steve Arseneau. I'm the director of the Dowagiac Area History Museum. I moved to Southwest Michigan in 1998 to take care of the local history collection at Southwestern Michigan College's museum. What was supposed to be a 3 to 5 year gig has now turned into 23 years. A museum move, and a family raised in beautiful Southwest Michigan. One reason I've stayed here so long is that I genuinely came to appreciate the history of Dowagiac, its industry, its people, as well as really appreciating the museum's collection. And that's why I put this together. Over the 23 years that I've been taking care of the collection, I've become well acquainted with it, obviously. The Dowagiac Area History Museum has a collection of well over 20,000 artifacts. I have my favorite items among them, and you're going to hear about them tonight. The quality of the collection speaks to the area residents' appreciation of this area's history. Round Oak hasn't been a going concern for 75 years, but the history of the company is in the city's bones, and the city's residents can feel that. This program, like almost anything else produced in the past year, is a result of COVID. My wife, Christina, runs the Niles History Center and is a bit more tech savvy than I am. Because of the closure of museums during the pandemic, she and her staff put some interesting virtual tours together of the Chapin Mansion, and they put them on their website. I started putting together this PowerPoint presentation to throw on the museum's website, but then thought it might be better to do as a virtual program. Then I can put it online for all to see at a later date. So that brings us to tonight and a few of my favorite things. Personally, if you're familiar with the song, I prefer the John Coltrane version to the Sound of Music version, but the song title lends itself well to the program. And so on to my favorite things. So the museum, if you've been there, has many beautiful round oak stoves on display, but my favorite is the plainest. The curator before me at Southwestern Michigan College, Mike Briza, had taken a trip to historic Charlton Park in Hastings, Michigan, and he found out they had some old round oak stoves. He took pictures, and when I started, I saw these pictures, and I determined that one of the stoves was likely the oldest known Dowagiac stove in existence, dating to 1870, which was 1 year prior to P.D. Beckwith incorporating the Round Oak Stove Company. The curator at Charlton Park reluctantly loaned the two oldest stoves that he had to the museum for the Antique Stove Association's annual meeting in Dowagiac in 2006. Bill Cronin and I picked them up, and we discussed ways that we could convince the curator that those two old stoves needed to stay in Dowagiac. Bill did a great job restoring them, and we had to find a way to get them donated to the museum, which a couple of years later, I was actually serving on the Michigan Museums Association board, and along with the new curator who replaced the previous curator who was reluctant, and she agreed that they needed to stay in Dowagiac. So we now own those two oldest stoves. So this 1870 stove is a true treasure for Dowagiac history. So the picture, the slide that I just brought up shows what was the original P.D. Beckwith stove that was placed in Thomas Jefferson Martin's barber shop, and that's the photo on the right of your screen. It's a little bit cruder than the one that we have, but you can see that there are some very similar features. The doors are the same. with the exception of the addition of the patent dates on the 1870 stove in our collection. The base is different on ours. You can see it's a really flat, just a flat sheet for that one, for the oldest stove that was in Thomas Jefferson Martin's. But it does give you a sense of what those first stoves look like. My second item that I've got for you is related to Captain Ivan Kinchelow, and many of you are familiar with the exploits of Captain Ivan Kinchelow. He was grew up on a farm near Cassopolis, went to Dowagiac High School, and he went on to become a double jet ace in Korea, test pilot who set the altitude record and was the first man to achieve weightlessness in space on that record-setting flight in 1956. Hailed as the first spaceman at the time. Kinchelow's mother donated a great collection to the museum, to the college back in 1977. It included every letter that he wrote to his parents, scrapbooks of every newspaper article that was ever written about the guy, and a personal item that she had of Kinchelow's. In that collection is this ashtray that's shown here. It was given to Captain Kinchelow on the day that he received his pilot's wings from the United States Air Force. It was given to him by his instructor, and it's engraved Kinch, K-I-N-C-H. You can see it underneath the airplane there, and so it's just a great personal artifact related to the man who is probably the most famous person to come out of Cass County. Here's my favorite photograph of Captain Kinchelow. There's hundreds of photographs that we've got of Captain Kinchelow, and this is my favorite. It's titled First, Fastest, Highest. It was an official Air Force photograph, and it's actually signed by the three gentlemen, personally signed by Captain Kinchelow on the left, Frank Everest in the middle, and Chuck Yeager on the right. And it's titled First, Fastest, Highest because Chuck Yeager was the first to break the sound barrier. At the time the photograph was taken, Everest had flown the fastest, and Kinchelow had flown the highest. So it's just a really nice photograph that we are lucky to have in the collection. When we moved the museum, I shortly thereafter got a phone call from a woman named Velva, and she lived in Benton Harbor, St. Joe, and she was wondering if we were interested in some of her collection related to her time being Miss Michigan. And so of course we were, because she had started her time as Miss Dowagiac. In 1953, Velva Robbins became the first and only Miss Dowagiac to become Miss Michigan and represent the state of Michigan at the Miss America pageant. Now, I know some of you may be asking, what about Donna Shepard in 1961? Well, Donna Shepard became Miss Michigan, but it's only because she was a runner-up to Miss Michigan at the Miss Michigan pageant, but she took over when the winner of the Miss Michigan actually won Miss America. So then Donna Shepard became Miss Michigan. But Velva is a great story. She was a shy school teacher who was prodded into entering the Miss Dowagiac pageant by her students. She credits their enthusiasm. She said that they were stomping their feet, clapping their hands on the stage at the Miss Dowagiac pageant, and she credits them for her win there. She then went to Muskegon, where she won the Miss Michigan competition, which took her to Atlantic City for the Miss America contest. She met the governor, traveled the state with him. It was Soapy Williams at the time, and she had a really fine time and a really good experience being Miss Michigan. This is the actual dress that she wore at the Miss America contest during the formal gown competition. And she gave us many other items related to her experience at Miss America, including a key to the city of Atlantic City, key to the city of Detroit, some pretty cool stuff along with some photographs. It's a great collection, and it really was a forgotten piece of Dowagiac history until she made that donation. Most people had thought that Donna Shepard's takeover in 1961 was the best Miss Dowagiac had ever done. Arguably, the most important individual in Dowagiac's history was Philo D. Beckwith. He's the founder of the stove company and just made an indelible imprint on Dowagiac. The museum has about a dozen different photographs of Beckwith, all of them after he had founded Round Oak, and most of them from the 1880s. In fact, I think all of them would be from the 1880s. So when Dave Bainbridge donated his large collection in the museum 4 years ago, he had pointed me to one particular photo album that he had, and he said, well, it's a really cool photo album, but there's really one thing that you have to see in it, and it is this photograph of P.D. Beckwith as a younger man. As you can see from the previous photo, his beard got quite a bit bigger. He grew a mustache to go with his beard, and it's just a great piece that we found an earlier photograph of P.D. Beckwith. So this was in this photo album of this individual given to a student who is graduating from Dowagiac High School, and it includes fellow students, some teachers, and then this P.D. Beckwith identified as a school board member, which dates this to the 1860s when he served on the school board. At the time that this photo was taken, P.D. Beckwith was on the verge of greatness and importance to the city of Dowagiac, but in this image, he's simply a member of the Dowagiac school board, struggling foundry worker. Continuing with a Round Oak theme, my next favorite item is this one. As a baseball fan, when the grandson of Archie Gardner called me one day, he lived in Florida and he had a brother in Wyoming, and thus that makes him the great grandson of P.D. Beckwith. He called me in 2003 and told me that the family had this gold pocket watch from a baseball game of Round Oak employees, and would we like to have it for the collection? It didn't take me long to say yes to that particular ask. The story behind this is that in 1914, Round Oak sponsored a series of baseball games between office workers who were named the shippers and the mounters, who were the laborers and the molders. And this it was a best of 7 series, just like a modern day World Series is held today. And each player from the winning team, we have newspaper articles and that tell us about this, that each player from the winning team was to receive a golden Waltham pocket watch. And Waltham are good pocket watches of the day. The shippers, the clerical workers, office workers, won the series handily, 4 games to none, though all the games were close, and they won the watches. The watches were engraved Round Oak Baseball Championship 1914, and this one was won by Dick Gardner. I suspect that the workers, the laborers and such, did not take the loss very, very kindly. To stick with the Beckwith and Lee families, we received in that Bainbridge collection some really nice items from the marriage of Mary Lee to Dickinson Bishop. Mary Lee was the granddaughter of P.D. Beckwith, daughter of Fred Lee and Kate Beckwith, who had the rockery on High Street. And she was their first and only daughter, and she was the sort of the first daughter of Dowagiac. I mean, she was the kind of the princess of Dowagiac, if there were princesses of Dowagiac at the time. She lived at that rockery on High Street, and in 1908 she married Dickinson Bishop, and it was the event of the decade. The Bainbridge collection included items from the wedding, including a party favor, which is a ceramic gold woman's shoe that you can see down in the photograph that accompanies this slide. There is an invitation to the wedding also shown there, and a silvered embroidered wrap worn by one of the bridesmaids. Now, also in that collection is a very unique piece, and it's probably might be one of the oddest items in the museum's collection. And it is a piece of the groomsman's cake. And the groomsman's cake is just is it in that? Yeah, it's up in that upper corner to the right of the invitation there. and it's a piece of the groomsman's cake, and it's boxed up nicely, and it amazingly is not moldy after over 110 years. It has survived to this time because it was a fruit cake, and it tragically Mary Lee Bishop died in 1910 after childbirth, and sadly the child also died. But Dickinson Bishop married Helen Walton in 1912 and took a honeymoon to Europe and the Middle East. And they were on the Titanic, returning from the honeymoon when it hit the iceberg and sunk. And Dickinson Bishop and Helen were lucky enough to survive. They got on one of the first lifeboats after calls for newlyweds. Many rumors were floating around that he dressed as a woman to get on one of the lifeboats, but that is not true. He was simply asked as a newlywed if he wanted to get on one of the lifeboats, and they did get on a lifeboat and survived. So I think it is absolutely amazingly cool that we have in our collection a piece of groomsman's cake from a wedding of one of the Titanic survivors. This is, I believe, going to be my last round oak. I'm sorry if it's not, but this is round oak homers, and I did a program on this a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, on what are called homers, and we've got 3 shown here. The fake gun was made during World War II during metal shortages by Peter Lazinski for his son Larry Lazinski. And he couldn't just go during World War II and pick up another cap gun for his second son. So he took an existing one and made that one. The cherub up there is an ashtray made by a member of the Wagner family that was donated by Dale Wagner a few years ago. And then the dog was made by a gentleman, and I'll go into that one in a little bit more detail. So a homer is an artifact that a worker produces using company tools and materials outside the normal production plans, but at the workplace and during work hours. So the ones made at Round Oak were frequently made out of the leftover melted iron. And so all those items would have been made out of that leftover melted iron, then sent to the enamel shop for painting and coating. And so it was a common practice in factories across the United States and Europe during the industrial age, and even past the industrial revolution. I know that they did them in the car factories in Detroit. It was a very common practice. And so what do we know about this Shanafelt dog? I call it the Shanafelt dog. This was donated to us by Gary Shanafelt. About in 2003, I think I found the record for it. So there were several different dog statues that were made by Round Oak workers. This particular mold was made by a guy named Abraham Lincoln Shanafelt. Great name. This one's of a Boston Terrier, and what would happen is somebody would have bought an item at a shop, probably somewhere either in town or on their travels. This one, doing research, I found was a Boston Terrier made by the Hughley Manufacturing Company of Pennsylvania. And what you find, and these would then become door stops. The Boston Terrier was a popular one made at other factories in the United States. As I said, this one was made by Abraham Lincoln Shanafelt. So this is a picture of an original Hughley one, and it's a popular one. And what you find with these reproductions is what the factory workers would do is they take the one that somebody brought to the factory, and then they'd make a sand casting of it, and then make one to be able to be given out to their friends or relatives. And you lose some of the details if you look and compare the 2 images here. The Hughley on the left, the Shanafelt one on the right, you can see some ribs, some kind of rib lines, a little bit more facial details, more wrinkles along the neck, and just a little bit more detail. And those details got lost in making the sand casting at the factory. But those items really truly are some of my favorite artifacts in the collection. I love those roundo combers. So I'm a sports fan, and so there's always going to be a few sports items that are going to be some of my favorites. And this is a pillow cover that commemorates the 1907 Dowagiac High School football team. Dowagiac High School started a football team in 1898. 9 years later, the football team was remembered by someone with this beautiful one-of-a-kind pillow cover, likely made by a young lady with solid sewing skills. The pillow cover features the players' names along with other sporting decorations such as the football in the middle, along with the year, a few pennants, and then there's also what appears to be a ring. And it wasn't until I closely examined this item that the artist used the letters of the players' names to spell out DHS, and that's in the Lindsley Ritchie Essig up at the top left. They have the DHS lined up. On the Stafford Bonine Jones Barnhart, they have Foot lined up. Ball, Clark, Wells, and Miles, they have Ball lined up. And then Rudder, Stebbins, Bates, and Campbell, they have team lined up to give us DHS football team. And this is also well documented. We could confirm this one that it was the football team because we actually had a couple of photographs of the football team fully identified, and also in the yearbook from that year with the football team. Here's a photo of the team in Michigan Central Railroad Park in downtown Dowagiac. So many area residents are well versed in the exploits of Captain Ivan Kincheloe, famous pilot, but there was a famous aviator who grew up in Cass County who had a major accomplishment 32 years before Kincheloe set the altitude record. Lee Wade of Cassopolis was one of 4 pilots on the first around the world flight in 1924. Taking off from Seattle in 4 open cockpitted airplanes, 4 pilots and 4 mechanics, 1 pilot and 1 mechanic on each airplane, set out on a 175-day journey across the globe, with refueling stops in oceans, deserts, mountains, and any sort of terrain that they needed to land in to get refueled and get sustenance. This treacherous journey made the successful pilots major stars 3 years before Lindbergh's transatlantic flights. So it's a very dangerous mission, and you can read more about it. There's some really excellent books, including one about Billy Mitchell that is featured in this, that features this particular story. There were parades held for these guys when they got back. Once they made it to New York City, in every stop that they made, every major city from New York to Los Angeles and back up to Seattle, there was huge parades for these guys when they arrived. So what we've got here, and it's on the left side, is an actual lap map that was used by Lee Wade on that historic mission. One of the actual airplanes, one of the 4 airplanes, is hanging in the rotunda at the Smithsonian Institution's Air and Space Museum. This was a major accomplishment for American aviation during that time when everybody was trying to do the next big thing. This photograph these are 2 photographs showing the crew and on some at parts of it. Lee Wade in the photograph on the upper right is in the middle, very middle. He's the shortest guy shown there, and it's that's them prior to leaving from Seattle. The photo on the left, Lee Wade is in the foreground on the left side, smoking a cigarette, and that's them in Baghdad, Iraq. The museum has a solid World War II collection that documents just some of the stories of our local veterans from the Civil War through most of the recent conflicts in the Middle East. We've got the World War II collection, but then we have collections from the Civil War all the way through the most recent wars. The biggest of the military collections is our World War II collection. It's in the center of the exhibit is the collection related to Byron Rice of Cassopolis. And his is my favorite um, of the World War II stories. Beyond one of my volunteers, Grace Werner, she was a nurse, and we've got part of her uniform as well. But Byron Rice is a great story, and he was just such a gentle soul to talk to. He enlisted in the United States Army and eventually became a pilot. Sent to Europe after D-Day, he flew his B-17 bomber, named the Crazy House, on bombing missions over Germany, Romania, and Hungary. He brought back some photos, and his crew nicknamed him Lucky because they knew that he had a wife and wouldn't take unnecessary risks and would be likely to get them back to base safely. If any of you knew Byron Rice, he was one of the "aw shucks, I didn't do anything special, I just did my job" type of guys. Very soft-spoken, gentle, but he was forever impacted by his experiences in the war. He said his most dangerous missions were flown over the oil fields in Ploiești, Romania, where they just took tons of shrapnel. I enjoyed every moment I got to spend with Byron before he passed away back in I think it was around 2007, 2008. Byron's collection was a really good one. It came with his dress uniform, which he's shown wearing in that photograph of him in the middle. Medals, he receives some pretty solid airplane pilot medals. Fragments of shrapnel he dug out of the controls from his airplane, and even his pre-Ray-Ban aviator sunglasses, which you can see on the base of that case that's shown in that photo of the exhibit. The leather bomber jacket is priceless. He said he wore it sometimes when he was working in the farm fields upon his return home, but it is in really good condition. It was very well preserved. Those World War II bomber jackets are sometimes pretty hard to find, especially in the condition that one's in. So the photograph shown here shows the Patrick Hamilton Hose Company with their new steam engine that they acquired in the 1870s. The firemen are in front of Whalen's livery on Park Place, which would be about located about where the Dollar General store is located today. They're showing off that new steam engine, which was the second fire engine the fire department had, replacing the hand pumper, which I am going to discuss here in a moment. On July 4th, 1860, the Dowagiac Fire Department, named the Patrick Hamilton Hose Company, was invited to attend a picnic in Battle Creek along with other fire departments from across the state of Michigan. Contests were held, things like ladder climbing, so there's ladder climbing, the hose carrying, those types of things. The biggest contest was the water throwing contest. Who could throw water the furthest from a hand pump fire engine? And these fire engines, they would have guys on both sides pumping up and down on the handle, which would then create water pressure and shoot the water as far as they could shoot it. Dowagiac threw the water 281 feet 6 inches from this hand pump fire cart, which is almost a football field, and it was judged to be a world record at that time, and it supposedly is a world record that still stands today, and it will stand forever because nobody is using hand pump fire carts anymore. As I said, the winner of that particular contest, they were going to host the next year's picnic on July 4th. And the Detroit judges, who constituted the majority, really wanted to host that next year's picnic. And they corruptly awarded first prize to Detroit, and arguments ensued, and it was quite a ruckus that was kicked up there. Newspapers picked up the story. They ran throughout Michigan and even on the East Coast. And the Cowing and Company, the company that manufactured Dowagiac's engine, saw the article, and they sent the Patrick Hamilton Hose Company the silver trumpet shown at the right and it's engraved. It has a picture of a fire truck on it. It's engraved to the Patrick Hamilton Hose Company for their quote unquote pluck in turning down second place when they deserved first place. One of my favorite collections is related to Pokagon Somerville native Webb Miller. He was a Dowagiac High School graduate who went on to be the world's premier journalist and war correspondent during the 1920s and 1930s. He broke countless stories, and part of his success was his ability to break stories before anybody else. He was great at working sensors, working around sensors, working sources, and getting those stories out. He broke the Gandhi independence movement story, so he was the first Western journalist covering that. Covered the Spanish Civil War, traveled on the Hindenburg on its first flight across the Atlantic, and basically covered every major world event for the United Press from in the 1920s and 1930s. In 1936, he was lauded in journalism circles for his groundbreaking coverage of the 1935 Italian invasion of Ethiopia. Today, that invasion of Ethiopia is recognized as the opening salvo of World War II, with a monster army from Italy with modern technology conquering Ethiopia, which was working with 18th and 19th century weaponry. And as I said, it's the opening salvo of World War II. Webb Miller received many accolades for that. That particular coverage that he did. He was traveling on the scene by any mode available, as shown here, riding a donkey. He worked sources and was deft at circumventing the Italian censors who were trying to manage the flow of information out of Ethiopia. His dispatches that headlined newspapers worldwide for the United Press were the first reports of the war, and he beat his competitors by hours. He was runner-up for the Pulitzer Prize, and he received many other journalism awards in 1936, including said medal shown here. And now my very favorite artifact. This is my favorite artifact, hands down. This was donated to the college back in 1968, shortly after it was opened, by a fellow named Guy Thomas. He had it stored up in his attic for decades. And it is a salesman's sample grain drill, 1/3 size of a normal size grain drill planter, made by the Dowagiac Manufacturing Company for the Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. So this was shown at the Columbian Exposition, and afterwards it was taken on the road to state fairs and county fairs across the Midwest. The drill was well documented in the company's advertising. It appeared on advertising cards and calendars in the late 1890s. To make everything to scale, it was pulled by ponies, shown here, as well as accompanied by a Dowagiac little person named Colonel Sparling. And he was 27 years old, and you can read right there. He's 27, weighed 55 pounds, and was 42 inches tall. The ponies were named Low and Jack, which were 35 inches high and weighed 175 pounds each. There was a working grain drill that weighed 120 pounds with 24-inch wheels. So it was so they sent this around. It was quite a hit at the county fairs, state fairs that they sent it to, and it showed up in a lot of the company advertising of that turn of the century era. As you can see, the calendar, I believe, is 1898. That's shown on the right side. The left side is a trade card, and its documentation, its just appeal, its condition. It's in excellent condition. All that paint that you see on that is original paint. Almost all the parts are original, and including a lot of the nickel plating that's still on it. The only pieces that aren't still original are the tubes, and those chains are covered, have a different kind of covering. They probably would have been metal. Other than that, it's all original. They're supposedly, actually, I know that there was a second one, a backup one that was made, and that one recently has sold at auction for quite a bit of cash in recent years. So that's my very favorite artifact. I've got one soon to come favorite artifact, and it's not quite on display yet. We're working on cataloging that collection yet. but it is related to Chief George Grady. George Grady in 1965 became the first Black police chief in the state of Michigan. And he was appointed into Dowagiac, and he was a groundbreaking trailblazer in the police industry with that appointment in 1965. His family last year donated his a collection of photographs, his police chief badges, newspaper articles, letters, all sorts of stuff. It's a great collection, and we're going to be adding him to our small town, big world locals who made history exhibit gallery. And so with that, I'm ready to open it up to any kind of questions that people might have. I've got a lot. Sorry if you donated items to the museum over the years and your items didn't make it to my favorites, but I just did about 15 items or so for this program. I like everything that people donate. And so stuff, we've got just too much to cover in one program, but a lot of great artifacts that people have donated over the years. So any questions for me?
Steve, this
Yeah.
is Barb Groner.
Hi, Barb.
And I'm wondering, I really like the Homers.
Uh-huh.
I'm wondering, were the workers given the opportunity to make items for home because that lead could not be remelted the next day and used in furnaces, or was that just a special thing they would do?
It was just a special thing they could do. I believe they would have been able to remelt that stuff, but they decided that they did that instead. As I said, lots of factories were doing this, and I love the Homers too, but I believe that they just wanted to do it. Good question though.
Since nobody else has one, I've got one further comment.
Uh-huh.
And I will share as a volunteer at the museum. The day I remember a woman coming in and handing me an artifact and saying, I would like to donate to this to the museum. And my telling her, we would be very glad to have it, but you'll need to bring it back during the week because volunteers cannot accept items for the museum. And she said, you will either take it now or I will throw it away. Whereupon I said, I would be very glad to take it. And 2 weeks later, do you remember what the item was?
I don't remember. I remember you telling me this though. Like, what was it?
Okay, 2 weeks later, there was an article in the Dowagiac Daily News about Farmer Edwards. It was his book showing everything he bought for the farm and sold and what he paid, what he got. And Edward Street is named after him. And I think it was from 1835. Do you remember that at all?
I don't.
Okay, you did have an article in the paper about it.
Okay. Oh, it sounds like my daughter has a question. So she's been tuning in. My wife is telling me Ellie has a question. So what is it, Ellie?
How did you find the part of the wedding cake?
Oh, how did we find the part of the wedding cake? Great question, Ellie. That was donated by a fellow that it was passed down through the family, the Lee family. Some person in the Lee family, I believe it was Dorothy Arman, who would have been a cousin of Mary Lee. She saved that piece of cake, and so Mr. Bainbridge then acquired it, and it's a really neat item. Good question, Ellie.
Hey, Steve, Gary here.
Hi, Gary.
Hey, I was out in the shop working on a car, and I thought, oh yeah, there's a 2-hour time difference, isn't there? So
You missed me talking about you missed me talking about your grandpa's dog then. Your great grandpa's dog.
Oh, did you? Yeah, I saw it in the email that you sent me. I'm sorry I missed it. I just caught the last end of it, but I appreciate it. You did a good job.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, I love that dog. I think if I remember right, Gary, you dropped it off. I was on vacation and I came back from a vacation and it was sitting on my desk.
Right, yeah. It was actually my great-grandfather's.
Yeah, Harry was your grandfather and Abraham Lincoln, Shanafelt, was your great grandfather.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we had that in the house forever. I always remember that thing.
Patty Patano asks if there is an item out there that you'd love to have for the museum. I should have anticipated that question and had a ready answer for you, Patty. Man, you know what I'd love to have out there that is Ivan Kinchelo's flight suit or uniform. Some of the items, some more personal artifacts related to Captain Kinchelo is what I'd really like to have. I know that the his flight suit and some of those items are actually at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at the Air Force Museum there, and I'd love to be able to add those. And my wife just asked about Webb Miller's cigarette case, and yeah, that would be a good one to have too. His golden cigarette case that was signed by everybody from Gandhi and Eleanor Roosevelt and Hitler and Mussolini. They all etched their names into it, and I do wish we had that, but it was stolen from his son and probably melted down for the gold content. Anybody else? Yes, Patty, it would definitely make international news. Theo has a queer question. All right, Theo, what you got?
Did you say that the cake is still not moldy?
Yeah, it's still not moldy. Fruit cakes apparently can last 110 years and not get moldy. It's quite amazing. We think we put a lot of preservatives in food today, but apparently they were doing it 100 years ago as well.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Any other ones?
It might have been the brandy in the fruit cake that preserved them so well.
Yeah, it could be the brandy. I'm sure that the fruit was soaked, so I bet you're onto something there, Gary. Yes, yes, Shirley has done a lot of time, done great stuff. She's a great donor for the museum too, actually, and a good financial supporter of the museum. I love Shirley. She's a great person. Yes, and who said that it wasn't surprising it wasn't eaten? Because of the brandy, probably. All right. Any other questions?
I have another question.
If there aren't any, then I will wish all the mothers out there happy Mother's Day. Hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully we'll be able to get back in person in the fall for September. Hopefully everything's kind of winding down then, and we can get back to live programs in the fall and September. So everybody have a great summer. We have normal hours now, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 to 5. We'll see about when we can expand that. And otherwise, have a great summer. Do what you love doing.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. It was great. He's gone.